In this episode, we talk about the Bengaluru water crisis. We also talk about Arvind Kejriwal's arrest. But first, we talk about the implementation of One Nation, One Election. Hi, I am Niharika Nanda, and you are listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In September 2023, a high-level committee headed by former President Ramnath Kovind was set up by the Law Ministry. The committee was tasked with suggesting ways to hold simultaneous elections at the national, state and local levels in the country. Now, the committee released its report earlier this month, and among its recommendations was a one-time transitory measure as the first step towards implementing simultaneous polls. The committee included Home Minister Amit Shah, former leader of opposition in the Rajya Sabha Ghulam Nabi Azad, former Finance Commission Chairperson N.K. Singh, former Lok Sabha Secretary General Subhash C. Kashyap, Senior Advocate Harish Salve and former Chief Vigilance Commissioner Sanjay Kothari. To learn more about the committee's recommendations and how simultaneous elections can take place in India, we have Damini Nath from the Indian Express joining us in this segment. So Damini, tell us about the recommendations that have been made by the Ramnath Kovind committee to implement the One Nation, One Election idea.
So the committee was set up in September last year by the government with the idea that it will give detailed recommendations of how to synchronize Lok Sabha, State Assembly and municipal elections. So the committee basically recommended about 15 amendments which would enable all these elections to be held together. In the first step, the committee recommended the Lok Sabha and State Assembly elections to be synchronized. And after that, within 100 days of those simultaneous elections, it recommended that municipal elections also be held.
Right. And Damini, the term that was used by the committee for describing the first attempt towards a synchronized election was a one-time transitory measure. So can you explain that to us a little?
Right. So what the committee said was that the way to start off the simultaneous elections would be for the government to take a one-time transitory measure. This would mean that after a Lok Sabha election, the government would issue a notification identifying an appointed date. And from that appointed date onwards, any assembly that is elected after that date will have its term curtailed till the term of the Lok Sabha. So for instance, if the government were to do this after the 2024 Lok Sabha elections and it appoints a date, say in June or July this year, then any assembly that is elected after that date will end with when the Lok Sabha term ends.
Yeah, but given the size of our country, how do we expect synchronized assembly and Lok Sabha polls to take place? Because at the moment, most of the state elections occur at different times.
So as of now, there are only 4 state assemblies which go to polls along with the Lok Sabha. After independence, when the first few elections were held, all state assemblies were held together with the Lok Sabha. But over the years, some assemblies' term was cut short because the government fell or, some other reason. So they became, separate. And as of now, like I said, there's only 4 that are held together. So for the rest of them, their terms will have to be curtailed or extended to align with that of the Lok Sabha. And for this, the committee gave detailed recommendations for amendments to the constitution of how this could be done. And when it comes to how these elections can be held in our country, the Election Commission has always said that it's for the idea, but it has, raised certain issues regarding logistics and personnel that would need to be taken care of.
Right. And talking about these issues, what kind of challenges will the system face in order to incorporate simultaneous elections?
So the first thing would be, for the constitutional amendment to be done. So for that, earliest it can happen is after the new Lok Sabha is formed after the elections. So the Lok Sabha would have to be formed, constitutional amendment would have to be brought, and after that only could the process start. When it comes to the Election Commission, they have said that they would need at least double the amount of EVMs. As of now, like in the upcoming elections, they're going to be using about 55 lakh EVMs. So they will have to double that up, and they would also need more security personnel. For example, in Jammu and Kashmir, the Election Commission has decided not to hold assembly elections together with the Lok Sabha elections this time. And the main reason is that they do not have enough security personnel to provide every candidate. So if Lok Sabha and assembly elections are to be held together in every state, the requirement for security personnel would increase. The requirement for EVMs, of course, would increase. the time taken for training the personnel and the amount of space required for storing the EVMs would also increase.
Okay, so this was about the assembly and the Lok Sabha elections. Is there something planned for the panchayat and the municipal elections as well?
So as of now, the constitution only gives the Election Commission of India the responsibility of holding Lok Sabha and state assembly elections. For municipal and panchayat elections, there are the respective state election commissions. So it would require an amendment to the constitution to enable a common electoral role for the Lok Sabha and state assembly elections on one side and the local body elections on the other. As of now, the state election commissions are free to have their own electoral role, though most of them start by taking the Election Commission of India's role and then they make changes to it depending on what is required.
And Damini, you also wrote about the concept of a constructive vote of no confidence, which was proposed by members of the committee. So talk to us about that and how is it related to simultaneous elections?
So Subhash Kashyap, who is a former Secretary General of the Lok Sabha and a member of the committee, he recommended the idea of a constructive vote of no confidence, which is what is called the German model. Basically, in that model, if no confidence motion has to be brought against the government, there has to be simultaneous positive vote in favor of an alternate leader or government. So that would ensure that there isn't a crisis and that it goes from one government to the next. The committee did not accept this recommendation from Mr. Kashyap. They said that they considered this idea, but they decided that it was not appropriate. And the main reason for that was that they felt it would dilute the power that MPs have to hold governments responsible.
So now, what is the way forward? Do we have a sense of when simultaneous polls could be implemented?
The Kovind committee actually has been very careful not to mention any dates or timelines in their reports. They've recommended that the one-time transitory measure be taken after a Lok Sabha election. They haven't mentioned, 2024 or 2029. But what government sources tell us is that the new government, after these upcoming Lok Sabha elections, would have to first accept the recommendations of the committee, then put in motion the process for the constitutional amendments. Parliament would have to pass that, and only then would it start. So the earliest could be the 2029 Lok Sabha elections.
Okay, so Damini, since you mentioned the closest elections that might witness the one nation, one election concept could be the 2029 Lok Sabha elections. Which states will have their terms curtailed or extended in order to fit into that time span?
So since only 4 assemblies are going to elections together with the Lok Sabha, all the other state assemblies will be affected by this. So any state assembly that has elections after June 2024 would have their term curtailed. So that would include, West Bengal, Punjab, Uttarakhand, Uttar Pradesh, Karnataka, Chhattisgarh, Telangana, and many more states.
For the past few weeks, Bengaluru has been grappling with an acute water crisis. Earlier this month, Karnataka Chief Minister Siddaramaiah said that the city was facing a shortage of 500 million litres of water every day, which accounts for about a fifth of the city's daily total demand. However, it's important to note that the water shortage isn't confined to Bengaluru alone, and it isn't solely a matter of drinking water. Currently, the entire state of Karnataka, along with adjoining areas of Telangana and Maharashtra, is experiencing extreme water scarcity. To talk about the reasons behind this shortage and what can be done about it, Indian Express's Amitabh Sinha joins us today in this segment. So Amitabh, tell our listeners what the current situation of Bengaluru is like and why is the city facing a water shortage?
Right. So we've been hearing about this water shortage in Bangalore for some time now, at least 2 to 3 weeks. And the primary reason, of course, is that not just Bangalore, but the whole of Karnataka, in fact, had, slightly lesser than normal rainfall in the last 1 year. The state of Karnataka, like most other states of the country, most parts of the country, it receives the predominant part of the annual rainfall actually comes during the monsoon season, and that's true for Karnataka as well, right? So during the monsoon season, there was a deficit in rainfall in Karnataka. Even after that, in the post-monsoon season and during winters, Karnataka does not get much rainfall. So there was no way to bridge that deficit. So what has happened is, in the last 1 year, there's been a deficit in rainfall, and that is what is now getting manifested in the kind of crisis that we are seeing. There are other reasons as well, but associated with the rainfall deficit.
And we understand that the issue of low rainfall is not just specific to Karnataka. Other southern states are also facing a similar crisis. So, why does the problem seem so much more acute in Karnataka?
So Karnataka was not the only state which had a rainfall deficit last year during the monsoon season. In fact, Kerala, the neighboring state of Kerala, had a much bigger deficit. Karnataka, I think, had about some 17-18% deficit. Kerala had almost double that, not 34 or 35% deficit during the monsoon season last year. And similarly, some of these states in the northern areas, UP had a large deficit. At least the eastern part of UP had a very large deficit. Bihar had a very large deficit. West Bengal had a deficit. But we are not seeing the same kind of water crisis anywhere else. And the reason for that mainly is that when rainwater comes and it seeps into the groundwater, the aquifers that store the groundwater, I mean, that's where the water is stored below the ground, those places. Now, the nature of aquifers in Karnataka is slightly different than most of the other states that we talked about. In Karnataka, and that's what some scientists have told us, that the aquifers below in Karnataka region are a little rocky and they have the capability to hold water is comparatively less. So they hold lesser amount of water compared to, say, the aquifers in the Gangetic Plains in UP, Bihar, where they can hold much larger amounts of water. What that means is if it has larger amounts of groundwater, then it can sustain, it can support the demands of water for a longer time, even if the rainfall has a deficit. So if there was a shortage of rain, the demands can be met by groundwater. But in Karnataka, that doesn't often happen because it has a relatively lower capability of holding water. It holds smaller amount of water. So it dries up quickly.
And Amitabh, at the moment, which part of Bengaluru would you say is more severely affected?
So what we are seeing in Bangalore, especially in the urban part of Bangalore, where there is also a drinking water crisis. So as a few scientists have told us, nearly half of Bangalore drinking water is supplied through piped water, and half of it, roughly, the households get their water, at least the drinking water supply, through pumping of groundwater. So the piped water is coming from the reservoirs, and the rest of the households, they get their drinking water by pumping it from the ground. Now, because there is a relatively less amount of water in underground in the aquifers, these are the areas where people are dependent on groundwater. These are the areas where the scarcity is the most. Because people who are connected or who have piped supply of water, they are getting their waters from reservoirs. Now, reservoirs is another problem. I mean, there as well, there is a shortage seeping in. But as of now, at least for the drinking water supply, there is enough water. So the households in Bangalore where they have piped water supply is relatively stable. The households which do not have piped water supply and are dependent on groundwater, that's where the crisis is most severe. But this is only about the drinking water supply. In general, there is a shortage of water, not just in Bangalore as we discussed, but across the state.
And now that the summer season is just around the corner, the water consumption in the city is going to go up. So how do we see Bengaluru dealing with that?
Yes, so that is a big worry because the current spell of water crisis that we see in Karnataka has happened even before the onset of summer. I mean, peak summer is still to happen. And as temperatures rise, the demand for water will go up, not just for drinking water, but also for other kind of things. Now, coolers might start working for, industrial usage goes up. Also, the demand for electricity goes up and, the dams and the hydroelectric projects, those start coming into the picture and they start playing a role. They become crucial. So the demand for water during summer season generally goes up. And that's true not just for Karnataka, but for the other states as well. So that's the big worry. If you don't have enough water now, then how do you survive through the rest of the season, at least till the rains finally come in during monsoon? And that's still 2.5 months away, 3 months away. So the first spell of rain under monsoon in Karnataka happens only in the first or second week of June. So it's still some distance away, and then that's a cause of worry. And that's why the reservoir status in Karnataka is being very keenly watched, because your supplies of water, especially if you are generating hydroelectricity to meet the increased demands of electricity, and if you have to increase the generation of power through hydroelectricity, then you have to have adequate water in the reservoirs as well. So you have to preserve water for that as well.
Right. And we understand that the lack of rainfall alone is not the reason behind the shortage. There are some intrinsic factors involved. So tell us about them.
So this time also, when there is a shortage, and on previous occasions of shortage as well, we hear about, the lakes that dried up, the number of water bodies that Bangalore had that have completely either dried up or disappeared from the cityscape, mainly because of rampant construction. A lot of, initially construction being allowed in areas where it should not have been allowed in the initial part. So those kind of issues that we hear. Now, all those kind of things do add to the problem. These are structural issues over a long time period. I mean, they have an impact on water availability in the city. So that is surely there now. But this part, what the current crisis that we are seeing in Bangalore is mostly unrelated to, the immediate trigger of this crisis is not all that we are talking about, urbanization, construction, drying up of lakes. They do form the backdrop. There's no doubt about it. But the immediate crisis has been triggered by rainfall deficit.
Also, Amitabh, what do experts say is the long-term solution for this problem? What can the city do to prevent such situations?
Oh, those things are, there are a whole set of water management issues that need to be dealt with, including how much do you store, cleaning up your dams, even how do you manage your water resources in the sense that how much value do you put on water? Mostly water is free across the country. Mostly, in most circumstances, water is a freely available resource. And as a result, it does get wasted a lot of times. And there have been huge number of policy recommendations about how to manage our water better. There have been quite a few, even some recommendations for making legal provisions on better water management. So the crux of the matter comes to how do you put value on water and how do you discourage wastage? How do you incentivize optimum utilization of water? How do you incentivize good practices in terms of water usage? And how do you discourage wastage? And there are whole studies that have been done about it. There have been committees, there have been recommendations, as I said. So it's a vast subject, different kind of things to be tried out in different areas. And some of these things are already happening. It's not just everything is in the academic realm only. There's lots of things that are being applied. But obviously, the kind of shortage that we are living with, probably much more needs to be done, as is the case with most of our other problems as well.
And in the end, we talk about Arvind Kejriwal's arrest. Declining to interfere for now with the arrest of Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal in the Delhi excise policy case, the Delhi High Court issued a notice to the Enforcement Directorate yesterday. This notice covers both the main matter and Kejriwal's plea for interim relief, aiming for his immediate release from the custody. The court has scheduled the matter for final disposal on 3rd of April. With respect to the nature of the issues raised in the matter, the single-judge bench of Justice Swarnakanta Sharma said that the Enforcement Directorate must be given a chance to file a reply for effective representation, adding that declining it would constitute a denial of a fair hearing and violate a fundamental principle of natural justice that applies to both parties, not just one. Earlier, senior advocate Abhishek Manu Singhvi, representing Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal, objected to his arrest by the agency and the subsequent detention. Singhvi argued that the arrest was intended to disable him from any active role in politics, thus impinging on level playing field and the basic structure of the constitution. To know more about the arguments made in the court, you can read Indian Express's Malvika Prasad's story, the link to which has been provided in the description. You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by Shashank, Bhargava and me, Niharika, Nanda. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.